The stars were quiet. Commander HFY pressed his three-fingered hand against the control panel of his ship and listened to the silence. For 300 years, space had been full of human voices. Their radio signals bounced between planets, like excited children calling to each other across a playground. Their ships filled the trade routes with constant chatter about cargo loads and weather reports, and what they had eaten for breakfast. Now there was nothing. HFY belonged to the Valthrine Trade Federation. His people had blue skin that shimmered, like water, and eyes that could see far into space without machines. They were good at business, and even better at staying out of trouble. For 50 years, HFY had been flying cargo ships between the stars, and he had never heard space so emptied out. He was bringing a load of crystal batteries to Earth when he first noticed something was wrong. Usually, the moment his ship entered the Sol system, his communication panel would light up like a festival. Earth traffic control would hail him with docking instructions. Human cargo ships would exchange greetings and gossip. News broadcasts would flood his receivers with stories about politics and sports and celebrity scandals. Today, his panel stayed dark. HFY tried the emergency frequencies. Nothing. He tried the commercial channels. Still nothing. He even tried the old analog radio bands that humans used for their primitive entertainment broadcasts. Silence. Earth hung in space ahead of him like a blue and white marble, beautiful and seemingly peaceful. But something was terribly wrong. The planet that had once buzzed with activity was now as quiet as a tomb. He activated his long-range scanners and swept them across the system. Mars Colony was there, its domed cities glittering in the sunlight, but no ships moved between the landing pads. The asteroid mining stations were still in place, their massive extraction machines frozen in mid-operation. The orbital shipyards around Jupiter hung empty, half-built vessels drifting like abandoned toys. HFY felt a chill run through his blue skin. In all his years of trading with humans, he had never seen them so still. They were always moving, always building, always talking. They reminded him of a species of insects from his home world that could never stop working, except humans were much more interesting to watch. He opened a channel to Valthrine Command. "This is cargo ship Blue Current," he said in his own language, which sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "I need to report something strange." The response came quickly. "Blue Current, this is Command. State your report." "The humans are gone," HFY said. "All of them." There was a long pause. Then, "Repeat your last transmission, Blue Current. I am in the Sol system. There are no human communications, no ship traffic, no response to hails. The planets are there, but the humans are not." Another pause, longer this time. "Blue Current, maintain your position. Do not approach Earth. A scientific vessel is being dispatched to your location." HFY waited in the empty system for 2 days. When the science ship arrived, it brought with it Dr. Nelthara, the Federation's leading expert on human behavior. She was older than HFY, with skin so pale it was almost white, and she had been studying humans longer than anyone else in the Federation. "Show me what you found," she said as soon as she boarded his ship. HFY took her to the bridge and demonstrated the silence. Dr. Nelthara listened with growing concern as he cycled through frequency after frequency, finding nothing but empty static. "This is impossible," she said. "Humans cannot be quiet. It is not in their nature. They talk when they are happy. They talk when they are sad. They even talk to themselves when no one else is listening." "Then where are they?" HFY asked. Dr. Nelthara was quiet for a long moment. "We need to get closer. I need to see this for myself." They approached Earth carefully. The planet looked normal from space, but as they drew near, the wrongness became more obvious. The orbital stations were still powered and operational, but no one was aboard them. Automated systems continued their routines, but there were no humans to direct them. They landed at New York Spaceport, one of the busiest transportation hubs in human space. The landing pad was clear, but dozens of ships sat abandoned on nearby platforms. Some had their engines still warm, as if their crews had just stepped out for a moment. Dr. Nelthara and Zexhai walked through the empty terminal. Shops were still open, their lights still on, but no customers browsed the aisles. A coffee shop near Gate 12 had drinks sitting on tables, some still warm to the touch. A child's toy had been dropped near the boarding gate for Flight 447 to Mars, as if a family had been called away suddenly. "Look at this," Dr. Nelthara said, pointing to a departure board. The last flight listed had been scheduled to leave 3 days ago, but the status still showed boarding. They found a security office and accessed the surveillance recordings. The footage showed normal activity up until 3 days ago. Passengers moved through the terminal, families said goodbye, business travelers hurried to catch flights. Then, at exactly 14:32 local time, every human in the frame simply stopped what they were doing and walked calmly toward the exits. There was no panic, no confusion, no fear. They just left, as if they had all received the same silent message at the same moment. "This is not natural," Dr. Nelthara whispered. Something called them away. Over the following weeks, similar reports came in from across the galaxy. Human colonies on distant worlds had been found empty but intact. Ships had been discovered drifting in space, with their crews gone, but no signs of struggle. Entire families had vanished from their homes, leaving meals half-eaten and doors unlocked. The last recorded human communication had come from Captain Alex Turner of the cargo ship Meridian. He had filed a routine shipping report from the Kepler 442 system at 11:15 Galactic Standard, time on what would later be called Day Zero. His message was perfectly normal. Meridian reporting successful delivery of medical supplies to Kepler Station. Proceeding to next destination as scheduled. All systems normal. After that, silence. The mystery deepened when investigators realized that humans had not simply vanished. They had taken specific things with them. Personal belongings were gone, but gifts from alien friends remained behind. Human-made technology had disappeared, but alien devices were left untouched. It was as if someone had carefully sorted through human civilization and taken only what belonged to humanity itself. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Representatives from 47 species gathered to discuss the crisis. For the first time in living memory, no human diplomat sat at the great circular table. "We need to face the truth," said Ambassador Kretal of the Xanthari Republic. "The humans are gone, and we do not know why or how. But we cannot ignore what this means for the rest of us." As the days passed, that meaning became clear. The galaxy had grown dependent on humanity in ways no one had fully understood. Now, with humans gone, the great machine of galactic civilization began to break down. And in the growing chaos, everyone began to realize the same terrible truth. They had lost far more than just another species. They had lost the glue that had held their entire civilization together. 6 months after the humans disappeared, the galaxy began to fall apart. The first sign of trouble came from the Korthik Mining Consortium. The Korthik were a proud species with thick gray skin and powerful arms built for digging. They had been mining precious metals from asteroids for centuries, but they had never been good with complicated machines. That was why they hired humans. On the mining station, Rigel 7, the great machines that pulled rare metals from space rocks had started to break down. The Korthik workers stood around the silent equipment, scratching their heads and looking confused. "The gravitational processor is making strange noises," said Foreman Gothak, his deep voice rumbling through the station's corridors. "It sounds like it is dying." The machine in question was the size of a small building. It used powerful gravity fields to separate valuable metals from worthless rock. When it worked properly, it could process 1,000 tons of ore every hour. Now it wheezed and sparked like an old man trying to climb stairs. "Where is Engineer Harper?" asked Gorthic. "She always knows how to fix these things." But Dr. Lisa Harper was gone, vanished along with every other human in the galaxy. Her office sat empty, her tools still arranged neatly on her workbench. Her coffee mug still sat on her desk, with a thin film of mold growing on the surface. Gorthic tried to fix the machine themselves. They had watched Lisa work many times, but watching was different from understanding. They pressed buttons and turned dials, but the machine only got worse. Strange lights flashed on panels that had never lit up before. Cooling systems overheated. Safety alarms began to wail. "Shut it down," Gorthic ordered. "Shut everything down before it explodes." When the machines went silent, so did the money. The Rigel 7 operation had been worth billions of credits. Now it was just expensive scrap metal floating in space. Across Gorthic space, similar disasters were happening on dozens of mining stations. Without human engineers to maintain the complex equipment, the Gorthic economy was collapsing. Meanwhile, in the Xanthari Republic, people were starting to get hungry. Xanthari were a delicate species with pale green skin and large eyes. Their 12 billion citizens lived on 47 worlds scattered across their territory. Feeding so many people on so many planets required careful planning and precise timing. Food had to be grown on agricultural worlds, processed in orbital factories, and shipped to population centers before it spoiled. The system was incredibly complicated, but it had worked perfectly for decades. That was because Lieutenant Jake Morrison had been in charge of making it work. Jake had been a logistics specialist, one of those humans who could look at a problem with 1,000,000 moving parts and somehow make sense of it all. He had managed food distribution for Sector 7, which included 14 worlds and over 2 billion Xanthari. His office walls had been covered with charts and schedules that looked like abstract art to most people, but Jake could read them like a simple book. Now, Jake was gone, and his charts were meaningless scribbles. "The food shipment from Altair 3 is 3 days late," reported Supply Coordinator Velther, her thin fingers nervously tapping against her datapad. "The grain processors on Vega 7 have stopped working. The protein farms on Centauri B are producing too much, but we cannot get it to the worlds that need it." Administrator Kelshar looked at the reports, piling up on her desk. Each one represented millions of hungry citizens. "Can we not follow Merson's procedures? He must have left instructions." "We have tried," Velther said sadly. "His system was too complex. He kept most of the important details in his head. We are like children trying to fly a starship." On the planet Xanthar Prime, food riots began in the capital city. Citizens who had never worried about their next meal suddenly found empty shelves in the stores. The government tried to explain that it was temporary, that they were working to fix the distribution problems, but hungry people do not listen to speeches. "Where is our food?" Angry voices shouted in the streets. Why did the humans leave us to starve? But the worst crisis was yet to come. For over 200 years, the hegemony of Brass and the Crystal Coalition had been enemies. The Brass hegemony was made up of warrior species who believed in strength and conquest. The Crystal Coalition was a group of peaceful traders who preferred negotiation to fighting. They had very different ways of thinking, and they did not trust each other. The only thing that had kept them from going to war was human diplomacy. Ambassador Kate Sullivan had been the chief negotiator between the two groups. She had spent 15 years learning their languages, their customs, and their ways of thinking. When the Brass hegemony complained that the Crystal Coalition was cheating in trade deals, Kate would listen to both sides and find a solution. When the Crystal Coalition accused the brass hegemony of being too aggressive, Kate would calm everyone down and suggest compromises. Kate had a gift for making enemies into friends. She could sit in a room full of angry aliens and somehow get them all to agree on something. Other diplomats tried to copy her methods, but they could never quite capture her magic touch. Now Kate was gone, and the old hatred between the two groups was coming back like a disease. That had started with a trade dispute over mining rights in the neutral zone. The brass hegemony claimed that the Crystal Coalition was illegally extracting crystals from asteroids that belonged to both groups. The Crystal Coalition said they had been mining there for decades, and the brass hegemony was just looking for a fight. In the past, Kate would have organized a meeting. She would have listened to both sides, checked the old treaties, and found a way to make everyone happy. But Kate was not there anymore. Instead, the brass hegemony sent warships to patrol the neutral zone. The Crystal Coalition responded by sending their own defense fleets. Soon, both sides were staring at each other. Across the invisible line that separated their territories, weapons powered and ready for battle. "They are trying to steal what is ours," growled General Thokmar of the brass hegemony, his metal-covered face gleaming in the light of his command center. "We will not let them." "They are threatening peaceful traders," whispered Council Leader Silvera of the Crystal Coalition, her crystalline body sparkling with nervous energy. "We must protect ourselves." The first shots were fired over a small asteroid that was worth maybe a few thousand credits. A brass hegemony patrol ship fired a warning shot across the bow of a Crystal Coalition mining vessel. The mining ship's escorts interpreted this as an attack and fired back. Within hours, both sides were calling for reinforcements. The war that followed would eventually consume half the galaxy, but that was still to come. For now, the galaxy was simply learning what it meant to live without humans. The Korthiks sat in their dark mining stations, surrounded by broken machines they could not fix. The Zenthari rationed their food and watched their children grow thin. The brass hegemony and Crystal Coalition prepared for a war that would benefit. No one docked in the empty halls of the Galactic Council. Alien diplomats tried to fill the seats where human ambassadors once sat. But the conversations were different now, harsher, more suspicious. Without humans to bridge the gaps between different ways of thinking, old prejudices were returning. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson. They had not just lost another species. When the humans disappeared, they had lost their translators, their problem solvers, their peacemakers. They had lost the people who could make impossible things work and turn enemies into friends. And as the crisis deepened, one question echoed through the stars. Would the humans ever come back, or was this the beginning of the end for galactic civilization? 2 years had passed since the humans disappeared, and the galaxy was dying. The great trade routes that had connected civilizations for centuries now lay empty and broken. Ships that once carried goods between distant worlds sat rusted and abandoned. Spaceports, the careful network of commerce that had made the galaxy prosperous, was falling apart piece by piece. Captain Ben Rodriguez had been the key to making it all work. He had been a cargo hauler, but not an ordinary one. Ben had possessed a special talent for dealing with different alien species who hated each other but needed to trade. He could carry weapons from the warlike Thrakari to the peaceful Luminous, collective without starting a fight. He knew exactly what to say to each group to keep them calm. The Thrakari were a violent species with red skin and sharp teeth. They made the best weapons in the galaxy, but they thought all other species were weak and cowardly. The Luminous Collective were beings of pure light who valued peace above everything else. They grew medicines that could cure almost any disease, but they refused to deal with anyone who carried weapons. This should have made trade impossible between them. The Thrakari needed medicine for their injured warriors, and the Collective needed weapons to defend their peaceful worlds from pirates. But they would not speak to each other directly. Ben had been the bridge between them. He would visit the Thrakari homeworld and tell them stories about the brave, collective defenders who used their healing powers to save lives on the battlefield. He would visit the collective and explain how Thrakari weapons were used only to protect innocent people from harm. It was not entirely true, but it was not entirely false either. Ben had a way of finding the truth that both sides could accept. Now, Ben was gone, and the trade between the two groups had stopped completely. The Thrakari were running out of medicine for their wounded soldiers. The collective was being raided by pirates because they had no weapons to defend themselves. Both groups were suffering, but their pride kept them from reaching out to each other. "We will not beg the light beings for their magic healing," snarled War Chief Gregtor, his scarred red face twisted with anger. "Let our warriors die with honor rather than crawl to those cowards." Meanwhile, on the collective central world, Elder Lamanara flickered sadly as she spoke to her council. "The weapon makers are too violent for us to approach. We must find another way to defend ourselves, even if our people continue to suffer." The breakdown of trade was happening everywhere. The Valdorian Republic had depended on the insect-like Skrill to provide rare minerals in exchange for manufactured goods. But the two species communicated through chemical signals that most other aliens could not understand. Human traders like Ben had learned to interpret these chemical messages and translate between the groups. Without human translators, a simple misunderstanding over shipping schedules had escalated into a major diplomatic crisis. The Valdorians thought the Skrill were trying to cheat them. The Skrill thought the Valdorians were being insulting. Neither group could explain their position to the other, so they simply stopped trading altogether, the technology that kept Galactic civilization running was breaking down too. Humans had been the galaxy's fix-it experts, the people who could take broken alien technology and somehow make it work again. They had a talent for looking at devices from different worlds and figuring out how to connect them together. On the massive space station Omega-7, the life support systems were failing. The station was home to 30,000 beings from 8 different species, each with different needs for air, water, and temperature. The environmental controls had been designed by a team of human engineers led by Ryan Patterson. Ryan had been a genius at making incompatible systems work together. The station's air processors used Zenthari filtration technology, Valthrine pressure regulators, and Korthek power systems. It should have been impossible to make them all function as one unit, but Ryan had found a way. He had used spare parts, creative wiring, and what he called good old-fashioned human stubbornness to create a system that kept everyone alive and comfortable. The system had worked perfectly for 10 years, but now it was breaking down. The alien technicians who remained on the station could maintain the individual components, but they could not understand how Ryan had connected everything together. His repair logs were written in human technical language that made no sense to other species. "The atmospheric pressure in Section C is dropping," reported Chief Engineer Culver, his 6 arms working frantically at the control panels. "The Zenthari filters are working fine, but something is wrong with the connection to the Valthrine regulators." Station Commander Yildara looked at the warning lights flashing across her command center. Each light represented a system failure that they could not fix. "How long before we have to evacuate?" "Maybe 2 weeks, Culver said sadly. "Maybe less." Similar disasters were happening on space stations throughout the galaxy. Orbital platforms that had housed millions of beings for decades were suddenly becoming death traps. The complex life support systems that humans had designed and maintained were failing faster than alien engineers could understand them. The Galactic Council was falling apart too. For 3 centuries, human diplomats had served as neutral mediators when different species disagreed. They had no old grudges against any alien race, so everyone trusted them to be fair. Human ambassadors had prevented dozens of wars and solved hundreds of disputes. Now the council meetings had become shouting matches. Without human mediators to keep the peace, old hatreds were rising to the surface. The proud hegemony of brass accused the Crystal Coalition of being weak and cowardly. The coalition called the hegemony a group of savage bullies. Both sides were probably right, but there was no one left to help them find common ground. Council Chairman Felmer tried to maintain order, but his voice was lost in the chaos. Please, honored delegates, we must work together. The human disappearance affects us all. The brass hegemony does not need help from crystal singers and light dancers, roared Ambassador Vecino, his metal armor clanking as he stood. We will solve our own problems, and we will solve ours without the help of metalheads and war lovers, chimed Ambassador Silneve, her crystalline body ringing like a bell with indignation. The meeting dissolved into arguments and accusations. By the end of the day, 3 more species had walked out of the council permanently. The great alliance that had kept the galaxy peaceful for centuries was crumbling. Resource wars were breaking out as desperate civilizations fought over what little trade remained. The carefully balanced system of galactic economics had collapsed into a scramble for survival. Species that had been friends for generations became enemies over mining rights and shipping routes. The Xanthari Republic, still struggling with food shortages, invaded 3 agricultural worlds that belonged to their former allies. The Korthic Consortium hired mercenaries to raid enemy mining operations. Even the peaceful Luminous Collective began attacking ships that passed through their territory, claiming they needed to protect themselves from pirates. In the space of 2 years, the galaxy had gone from a thriving community of civilizations to a collection of warring tribes. Trade routes that had carried prosperity for centuries were now battlefields. Space stations that had been symbols of cooperation were abandoned ruins. The great alliance that had united dozens of species was nothing but a memory. And in the growing darkness, everyone began to understand the same terrible truth. Humans had not just been another species among many. They had been the glue that held everything together. They had been the translators who helped different cultures understand each other. They had been the engineers who made impossible technologies work. They had been the diplomats who turned enemies into friends. Without them, galactic civilization was not just damaged, it was doomed. The search for the missing humans was the largest operation in galactic history. Every surviving civilization that could still afford to send ships joined the effort. The Valthrine Trade Federation contributed their fastest scout vessels. The Xanthari Republic sent their best long-range explorers, despite their ongoing food crisis. Even the warring Brass Hegemony and Crystal Coalition agreed to a temporary ceasefire so they could help with the search. The operation was called Project Recall, and it was led by Dr. Kethma, the brilliant Valthrine scientist who had spent decades studying human culture. Kethmer was old even by Valthrine standards. His blue skin faded to almost white with age, but his mind was still sharp as a laser blade. We will find them, Kethner announced to the assembled fleet commanders. Humans do not simply vanish without leaving traces. They are too loud, too messy, too alive to disappear completely. Working alongside Kethmer was an artificial intelligence that had once been the research partner of Dr. Steve Thompson, a human physicist who had vanished along with all the others. The AI called itself Newton, after an ancient human scientist, and it was the closest thing they had to human thinking. Analysis suggests that human disappearance was not random, Newton reported in its electronic voice. Pattern recognition indicates systematic extraction rather than catastrophic event. The search team spread out across the galaxy, visiting every world where humans had lived or worked. What they found was stranger than anyone had expected. On the colony world of New Eden, Search Team Alpha discovered something impossible. The human settlement was completely intact, but it looked like everyone had simply walked away in the middle of their daily activities. Breakfast dishes sat on tables, with food still on them, but the food had not rotted. Clothes hung in closets, but only the clothes that aliens had given to humans as gifts. Every piece of clothing that humans had made for themselves was gone. "This is not natural," said team leader Morgana, her crystalline fingers carefully examining. "A child's bedroom. Look at this toy box. The toys made by human companies are missing, but the alien toys remain." Someone sorted through these belongings very carefully. On the research station Europa 5, the investigators found Dr. Carol Evans' laboratory exactly as she had left it, except for one crucial detail. All of her human-designed equipment had vanished, but the alien instruments she had borrowed from other species were still in place. Her computer showed that she had been working on a complex equation when she disappeared, but the work stopped in the middle of a calculation. She was interrupted, observed Dr. Velinara, a Xanthari scientist, who had worked with Carol for years. But there are no signs of struggle, no indication of fear or panic. The coffee cup on her desk is still sitting exactly where she always placed it when she took a break. The most puzzling discovery came from the diplomatic quarter on Centauri Prime. Ambassador Peter Clark's residence showed clear signs of packing, but it was the strangest packing job anyone had ever seen. Human items were gone: clothes, personal photos, books, documents. But gifts from alien dignitaries remained in perfect order on their shelves. A ceremonial sword from the Thrakari war chief sat undisturbed. A singing crystal from the Luminous Collective still hummed softly in its display case. It is as if someone made a list of everything that belonged to humanity and took only those items, said Investigation Chief Korthik, his gray skin wrinkled with confusion. But who would do such a thing? And why? The breakthrough came when the search teams reached the agricultural world of New Montana. The colony had been home to 5,000 human farmers and their families. Like all the other settlements, it was empty but undamaged. The crops were still growing in the fields, tended by automated systems that the farmers had left running. It was in the elementary school that they found the clue that changed everything. Search Specialist Twinara was exploring the abandoned classrooms when she noticed something unusual. On the wall of a kindergarten room was a collection of children's drawings. Most had been taken down, presumably by the teachers when they left, but one had fallen behind a desk and been forgotten. The drawing was signed Lucy Chun, age 8 inches, in shaky crayon letters. It showed stick figures of a family, a mommy, a daddy, a little girl, and a baby brother. They were walking toward what looked like a ship, but it was unlike any ship design in the galactic database. The vessel was huge and seemed to bend space around it, creating swirls of color that hurt to look at. Most interesting of all were the figures standing near the ship. Lucy had drawn them as tall beings made of pure light, with no faces but somehow still seeming kind and welcoming. The light beings had their arms stretched out toward the human family, as if inviting them aboard. At the bottom of the picture, in careful crayon letters, Lucy had written, "Going to see the pretty lights with Mama and Papa." Dr. Kethmer stared at the drawing for a long time. "This child saw something," he said finally. "Something her parents told her they were going to do." Newton's electronic voice crackled with excitement, cross-referencing child's artistic interpretation with known technologies. No match found in galactic database. Ship design suggests manipulation of space-time beyond current understanding. More evidence began to surface as the search teams looked specifically for clues about these mysterious light beings. On the mining station Asteroid 47, security cameras had captured the final moments before the humans disappeared. The footage showed workers going about their normal duties when suddenly they all stopped and looked up at the ceiling with expressions of wonder and joy. They could not see what the humans were looking at, but their faces showed no fear, no confusion, only a kind of happy recognition, as if they were greeting old friends. On the passenger liner Stardancer, which had been found, drifting empty in space, investigators discovered personal logs from some of the human passengers. The final entries all spoke of strange dreams they had been having, dreams of beings made of light who spoke without words and promised to show them wonders beyond imagination. "I dreamed of them again last night," wrote passenger Linda Walsh in her final log entry. "They say it's time to come home. I don't understand what they mean, but I feel like I've been waiting my whole life for this moment." Dr. Kethmer assembled all the evidence and presented it to the Galactic Council's emergency session. The remaining delegates listened in stunned silence as he explained what the search teams had discovered. "The humans were not taken against their will," he announced. "They were invited. Something or someone made contact with them and offered them a choice. Based on the evidence, it appears they chose to leave. But why?" demanded Council Chairman Felmer. Why would they abandon their homes, their lives, everything they had built? Newton's voice filled the chamber. "Analysis suggests humans were recruited for specific purpose. Unknown entities demonstrated advanced technology far beyond galactic capabilities. Humans may have been chosen for unique characteristics that other species lack." "What characteristics?" asked Ambassador Silneve of the Crystal Coalition. Dr. Kethmer looked around the chamber at the arguing delegates. The empty seats where human ambassadors once sat, the growing tension between species that had once been friends. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "they were chosen because they were the only ones who could bring us all together. And perhaps they will return when they have learned how to do it better." The chamber fell silent as the implications of his words sank in. Somewhere beyond the rim of the galaxy, humanity was not lost but learning. The question now was whether galactic civilization could survive long enough for them to come back. 5 years after the Great Silence began, the impossible happened. A human voice spoke from the void beyond the galaxy. It was Captain Alex Turner, the same pilot whose shipping report had been humanity's last communication before they vanished. His voice crackled through the deep space monitoring stations, clear and strong, despite traveling across impossible distances. "This is Captain Alex Turner of the starship New Horizon," he said. "We are coming home." The message sent shockwaves through what remained of galactic civilization. On every world, beings who had given up hope suddenly dared to dream again. In the ruins of the Galactic Council chambers, emergency sessions were called. Long-range sensors were pointed toward the galactic rim, searching for any sign of returning ships. Dr. Kethmer was the first to detect them. His instruments picked up energy signatures unlike anything in the known galaxy. The ships that approached were human in design, but changed somehow, as if they had been touched by technology that bent the rules of physics. "They are not the same," Kethmer whispered to his research team as he studied the readings. "The humans who left were impressive, but these ships show capabilities we cannot understand." When the first human vessel materialized in normal space near the Centauri system, it was beautiful beyond description. The ship looked like it was made of crystallized starlight, solid, but somehow still glowing with inner fire. It moved without engines, gliding through space as easily as a fish swimming through water. The ship's communication system activated, and Dr. Lisa Harper's voice filled the airwaves. She had been the brilliant engineer who once maintained the Korthic mining equipment, but now she sounded different. Her voice carried a depth and wisdom that had not been there before. "Greetings to all our friends across the galaxy," Lisa said. "We have returned, but we are not the same people who left. We have learned much during our time away, and we bring gifts for everyone." The ship approached the broken mining station Rigel 7, where the Korthic had been struggling with their failed equipment for years. Lisa's vessel docked with the station, and she stepped out to greet the bewildered miners. Foreman Gorth could hardly believe his eyes. Lisa looked human, but there was something new about her. Her eyes held depths like looking into space itself, and when she moved, it seemed like reality bent slightly around her. "Engineer Harper," Gorthic rumbled, his voice thick with emotion. "We thought you were dead. The machines have been broken for so long." Lisa smiled, and her smile was warm and familiar despite the changes in her. "I know, old friend, but I understand them now in ways I never did before. Let me show you." She walked to the massive gravitational processor that had been silent for years. Instead of using tools, Lisa simply placed her hands on the machine and closed her eyes. The device began to hum with power, but this time it was different. The machine sang like a musical instrument, its operation smooth and perfect. "How did you do that?" Gorthic asked in amazement. "I learned to speak with the machine itself," Lisa explained. "Every device has a kind of consciousness, a desire to fulfill its purpose. I can feel what it needs now and help it work better than ever before." Similar reunions were happening across the galaxy. Lieutenant Jake Morrison returned to the Xanthari Republic with solutions to their food distribution crisis. But Jake had changed too. He could now see the flow of resources and needs across entire star systems as clearly as reading a simple book. The problem was never logistics, Jake explained to the grateful Xanthari officials. The problem was that we were thinking of food as just cargo instead of life-giving energy that connects all living beings. When you understand that connection, distribution becomes as natural as breathing. Under Jake's guidance, the Xanthari food network was rebuilt better than ever. Shortages became abundance, and for the first time in decades, no Xanthari citizen went hungry. The most dramatic change came when Ambassador Kate Sullivan appeared at the emergency session of the Galactic Council. The chamber had been half empty for months, with many species refusing to participate in the endless arguments. But when word spread that Kate had returned, delegates rushed back to hear what she had to say. Kate entered the chamber and something amazing happened. The constant background tension that had filled the room for years simply melted away. Beings who had been enemies for decades found themselves looking at each other with new understanding. "I can feel what each of you is feeling," Kate said, her voice somehow reaching every being in the chamber in their own language. "I can sense your fears, your hopes, your needs. You have all been suffering because you forgot how to truly listen to each other." She turned to the brass hegemony delegation. "You are not savage bullies. You are protectors who fear that your strength is not appreciated. You want to be needed, not feared." Then she addressed the Crystal Coalition. "And you are not weak cowards. You are healers who are afraid that your gentleness is seen as uselessness. You want to help, not hide." Both groups looked at each other with surprise. For the first time in years, they saw past their old prejudices and recognized the truth in Kate's words. "The beings who took us called themselves the architects," Kate explained to the assembled council. "They are ancient beyond measure, and they have been watching the galaxy grow for millions of years. They saw that our civilization was heading toward destruction, torn apart by the very differences that should have made us stronger." She paused, and when she spoke again, her words carried the weight of cosmic truth. "They offered us a choice. We could stay and watch everything we had helped build fall apart, or we could come with them and learn how to truly heal the wounds between species." Captain Ben Rodriguez stepped forward from the human delegation. He looked the same, but when he spoke, his words somehow made perfect sense to every being in the chamber, regardless of their language or culture. "We spent 5 years learning from the architects," Ben said. "They taught us that the barriers between species are not real walls, but illusions created by fear and misunderstanding. They showed us how to see past those illusions to the truth underneath." Dr. Carol Evans appeared next, her scientific instruments glowing with impossible energy. We bring new technologies that will make scarcity a thing of the past. Energy that flows freely, materials that reshape themselves according to need, medical knowledge that can heal any wound or illness. But it was 8-year-old Lucy Chun who spoke the most important words of all. She was 12 now, but her eyes held the wisdom of someone much older. The pretty lights taught us that the galaxy is like a big family, Lucy said simply. Sometimes family members fight and say mean things to each other, but deep down, they all love each other and want everyone to be happy. We just had to learn how to remember that love. Over the following months, the galaxy began to heal. The new human abilities allowed them to repair not just machines and supply lines, but the deeper wounds of mistrust and fear that had torn civilizations apart. Ancient enemies became friends as they learned to truly understand each other. For the first time, the Corthic discovered that their strength was appreciated when it was used to protect rather than intimidate. The Zenthari found that they're careful. Planning skills were valued when used to help everyone prosper. The Brass Hegemony and Crystal Coalition learned that their different approaches to problems made them stronger when they worked together. Space stations were rebuilt better than before. Trade routes reopened with new efficiency and fairness. The Galactic Council became a place of genuine cooperation instead of endless argument. And in the center of it all were the humans, no longer just another species among many, but bridges between all species. They had returned not as conquerors or rulers, but as healers and connectors, helping every civilization discover their best selves. The galaxy that had been left in ruins by humanity's disappearance was reborn through their return. But this time, it was built on understanding rather than mere cooperation, on love rather than just tolerance. Lucy Chun, now attending the same school on New Montana, where her prophetic drawing had been found, looked up at the stars during recess and smiled. The pretty lights had kept their promise. They had brought everyone home.